Hi, this is Krista at the Secret Yarnery. Today we're making this super awesome cozy baby blanket using an eyelash yarn. This is Cake's Panda. I'll also be showing you how to join your yarn in the middle of a row as well as the end of a row. So if you've ever seen this fuzzy yarn, it is so soft and squishy. Wanted to make a blanket, but we're a bit scared of how to do it without seeing your stitches. I'll be showing you how in this tutorial. For this tutorial, I'll be using Cake's Panda from Ice Yarns. It is a size 6 bulky yarn. What I like about it is all the fuzz is wound into a chain, so it doesn't come out if you frog it or it goes in the washing machine. All that cute little fuzz will stay on the yarn. You will also need your crochet hook. I'll be using a 7mm, yarn needle, stitch markers, and a pair of scissors. To make a small baby blanket, if you have 1 pack of this yarn, so 3 cakes, that will work out to be 60 centimeters by 90 centimeters or 24 inches by 35 inches. For a regular baby blanket, you will need 2 packs, so 6 cakes, and that will work out to be 48 inches by 35 inches or 120 centimeters by 90 centimeters. And if you want to do a toddler size, then I would suggest 3 packs, and that will just make it taller. So get all your things ready and let's get started. If you have 3 cakes, you'll make the small baby blanket, so you'll chain 60 plus 1. And if you have 2 packs of yarn, you can make the larger baby blanket, and that will be a chain 80 plus 1. So just do a regular slip knot and pop that onto your hook. And just chain loosely. And what I mean by loosely is I'm not pulling my yarn back to make the stitch the right size. I'm just letting the hook go through and I'm not correcting. So some of those chains will be nice and big, that's fine. If you are a tight chainer, you can go ahead and use a larger hook size. I go up by 1mm. So chain 60 for a small baby blanket and chain 80 for a larger. So there is my chain 20. And now we'll just chain 1. So whatever your number was, plus 1. Now we're going to go back. We're going to start in the 4th chain from our hook. So we don't count what is on our hook, and we don't count the knot at the other end. We just count these V's in between. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for this tutorial, I'm just going to be looking at the bottom loop, and that's going to be counting my stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to go right into the bottom, just grabbing that 1 loop and getting 2 strands of that stitch on top of my hook and 1 underneath. So wrap your yarn and make 2 double crochets into the 4th chain from your hook. There's our first double crochet, and into the very same stitch, your 2nd double crochet. Now we're going to skip a stitch and do the same thing into the 2nd chain. So we're just looking at the bottom. We've gone into this loop here. We're going to skip this loop and go into the 2nd. And we're going to do this all the way along our chain. 2 double crochets into every 2nd chain. There's 1 double crochet and 2 double crochets. Wrap your yarn and into the 2nd chain. So again, just looking at the bottom, we can see we've gone into that stitch, skip the next, and go into the 2nd. So keep going like this all the way along your chain. 2 double crochets, skip a stitch, 2 double crochets, skip a stitch all the way along, and I'll meet you at the end of your row. At the end of your row, we're going to make 1 double crochet into that last chain. So 1 double crochet into that last chain, chain 3, and turn your work. So this is a 1 row repeat. It's the same for every single row. So we're always going to end with a double crochet, and we're always going to start with a chain 3. So find the center of the next 2 double crochets, the pair, and we're going to make 2 double crochets right into the center. So every pair of double crochets gets a pair of double crochets into the middle. just like that. And find your next pair. Just wiggle your fingers in because we're going to be working right into that space. And 2 double crochets. Into the next pair, 2 double crochets. So you can just use your fingers and find that pair of double crochets and make your next pair right into the center. So continue like this all the way along the row, making 2 double crochets into the center of your double crochets down below. And I'll meet you at the end of the row. At the end of the row, we're always going to have this chain 3. So just get your hook into the top of that chain 3. We want 2 strands of that stitch on the top of our hook. So wrap your yarn and just push your hook in, 2 strands of that stitch on your hook, and make your last double crochet. So that's the end of our row, and to start your next row, always a chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Turn your work, and you're going to start with your pair right into the center of the next pair. The center of each of these pairs, all the way along your row, will get 2 more double crochets, and that's it for this pattern. So now I'll show you with the textured yarn. So we'll start the same way, doing your chain. So if you have 3 cakes, you'll chain 60. If you have 6 cakes, you will chain 80. If you want to make it not a baby blanket, you want to make a queen size or twin, just chain the width that you would like your blanket to be. And with the fuzzy yarn, I'm going to go up a hook size for my chain. So I'll be using a 7mm for my blanket. And for my chain, I'll use an 8mm, just to make sure that that starting chain isn't too tight. If your starting chain is too tight, your blanket will pull and be smaller on one end, and we don't want that. So now we're just going to count, and you can get some stitch markers ready, and we can put a stitch marker every 5 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'll grab a stitch marker and just pop it around one of those strands down there. Just so we don't have to count later. We know that we just did 5. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and pop a stitch marker. So keep going until your chain is the width you want it to be, and also end on an even number. So you want to end with an even number or a multiple of 2 for your starting chain. When your chain is the length you want it to be, or the width of the blanket you want to make, switch back to your regular hook. I'm using a 7mm for my yarn, and chain 1. Now we're going to count back. We want to work into the 4th chain, same as we did with our other yarn. So we're just going to feel our stitches. We're going to feel that yarn, and in the center you'll feel the little knot. Can you see that little knot there? It's not really a knot, but it's the yarn twisted on itself. So you'll feel strands being flat, and then you'll feel a little twist. So we want to count each of those flat spots as one chain. So there's 1, 2, 3, and I'll be going in right after that stitch marker. That's my 4. So just in, it doesn't matter where, don't worry about 1 strand, 2 strand, does not matter. Go in and do your 2 double crochets. This is the hardest row that you'll do, so take your time and don't stress out about it too much. Just do your best. So now I've gone into this chain here, so I'm going to wiggle my fingers down until I feel that knot or that twist of the yarn, and that signifies the end of that chain and the beginning of the next. So after that little twisted yarn, there's a flat spot, and then there's another twisted yarn. So right after that next twist, I'm skipping this stitch in the middle. I'm going into the second, and I'm going to make 2 double crochets, and I'm not worried about where. The good thing about fuzzy yarn, you can't see where you went in. So 2 double crochets into the second chain, and you're going to keep doing this all the way along, wiggling your fingers to find that twist, the flat spot, the twist, and going into the next spot. So keep wiggling your fingers along. I've worked into this chain with my stitch marker, and there is a little twist right after, and a chain right there with these loose strands and a twist right after. So I'll go into the next chain or the next flat spot and make my 2 double crochets. So I've gone into that chain, feeling for the next twist, which is right there. Next flat spot, that's its chain we're going to skip. Next twist, right in there. So the next chain down. So we're just going to keep going like that, just feeling along for that twist of the yarn and the flat spots. The flat spots are a chain and the twists are the in between the chains. So keep going like that. Don't worry if you have like loops hanging down. It'll all even out when it is finished. So keep going and I'll meet you at the end of your row. At the end of the row, we're going to make 1 double crochet just into that last chain. Don't worry if you're skipping a chain or not skipping a chain, just make 1 double crochet into the last chain. And that's the end of the first row. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and turn your work. You can take your stitch markers out now. And now we're going to wiggle our fingers along. We can see where our double crochets start at the bottom, and we're going to go right in between that pair. You can kind of just wiggle your fingers along to get an idea of where they are. And we're going to make our double crochets right into the center of those pairs from down below. So wrap your yarn and into the center of those double crochets, 2 double crochets. So every pair down below gets a pair for the new row. And now your fingers, it's a lot easier to feel what you're doing. You just find that pair at the bottom where they're together and wiggle your fingers up a bit and straight in where your finger is. So 2 double crochets into each of those pairs, into the center of the pairs. Wiggle your fingers, 2 double crochets. All the way along your row. And this is a 1 row repeat, so you'll be doing the same thing for every row. And there's our last pair. I'll wiggle my fingers in the center of them and make my last 2 double crochets. And now we have this little bloop at the end, and that's our chain, and we're going to work into the top of it. So we can't see where we're going. We're just going to wiggle our fingers in there, try to separate a strand. Now we do want to have 2 strands on the top of our hook. We want to go into the bottom area so we get most of the yarn on the top of our hook. And 1 double crochet. So that's the end of our row repeat. Now we'll chain 3, 1, 2, 3, turn your work. And now we're going to go in to each pair going back. So we ignore this starting chain or last double crochet. That's just the edge of our blanket. And we just start straight into the center of our V's from the row below. So 2 double crochets into each of those stitches. At the end, 1 double crochet into the chain, chain 3, turn your work, and repeat until your blanket is finished or you need to change your yarn. To join a new yarn in the middle of a row, you can still do a magic knot with this yarn. We're just going to leave a bit of a tail and we're going to work them in also. So my old yarn facing one direction and my new yarn facing the opposite direction. Take your new yarn and lay it over top of your old yarn and poke it underneath. And we're going to make a regular knot. We're not going to make it tight. Just leave it loose like that, not pulling at all, just like hanging out. Leave a little bit of a tail. And now you're going to do the same with your old yarn. Lay it over top of your new yarn, poke it under, and do a regular knot. leaving it a bit loose. We don't need anything tight right now. And also leaving a bit of a tail. Just pull it down. So we have old yarn, new yarn. We can pull them and those big loose knots will slide towards each other. When they get towards each other, that's when we can start pulling a little bit, snug them up, and now pull your tails to make each of those knots tight. Just keep repeating that until it is nice and snug. Now it doesn't really matter which way you go. We're going to take a tail and work it double when we get close to it. So we're going to work our tails just like regular yarn. We'll just keep going until I get a bit closer to it. There we go. And when you're close to that tail, just work it the same as your yarn, the same as your working strand. And work it straight into that double crochet. Now we're on to our new yarn and we just keep going. So we joined our yarn here and it is right tucked in. You might have a little tail that comes out, and then I would just go ahead with my needle and thread your needle down into your stitches. Just empty, I haven't threaded it yet. Just work your needle into your blanket. And then when it gets close to that little tail, poke the tail into your needle and drag it in. So that stitch is all nice, and if the other tail, there's the other tail, we'll do the same thing for both of those tails. To change colors at the end of the row, to start a new stripe, start your double crochet into the top of that chain 3, leaving the last 2 strands on your hook. Cut your yarn, hold it down on the back of your work, grab your new yarn, put a loop onto your hook, leaving about the same amount of tail, enough to work in with a needle, and finish that double crochet with your new yarn. Now drop your tail again, so you're holding 2 tails along the back of your work, and do your chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Now you can drop your tails and turn your work and just keep going like normal. Then to finish off your tails, you can take your 2 tails together, give them a little knot. You could double knot them if you care to, but 1 knot's generally good enough. You don't want it super lumpy, but you do want them connected. And then just go ahead and sew in your tail as you normally would, and just snip off the extra. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, give the video a thumbs up, share with your friends. Love to see your yarn and how yours turned out. You can find me on Facebook, The Secret Yarnery, also over on Instagram at Secret Yarnery. And you can also join our Facebook group, The Secret Yarnery Crochet Community. So thanks so much for hooking along, and we'll see you in the next video. Stay hooked.